Hello, Dark Reader, and welcome to the Dark Side of the Library podcast. I'm your host, Katie. I am so sorry that we haven't had any posts or podcast episodes, at least the curated books for March yet. We are falling behind, and I had neurovirus last week. We've had a couple family emergencies pop up, and I was also sick the week before that. I had a show. So mostly this is on me. I'm so sorry. Hopefully we'll be more on track soon. I think March is a longer month, so hopefully we'll be able to nail it. But you might be able to see further. We might post a couple more times in the week just so that we can catch up. So stay tuned for those podcast episodes as they kind of sneak into the agenda. Also, make sure to tune into our show notes. You can find that at darksideofthelibrary.com. And make sure if there are any books that you've been wanting to read, or if you're just like trying to find a good spring read, you can find a lot of books over there. I use that place all the time. So that's a little update on myself. We are finally back on track. We are going to be doing a minisode today. Today we are going to be talking about the novel by Alice Feeney. It is Daisy Darker. I actually was not going to read this novel originally. It was not really on my TBR. It sounded interesting, but it was just, it was like, we've got a lot on our list. At least I have a ton of books on my list. So I actually had a friend talk about it, and she raved about this book, and she's like, it actually is one of the only 5-star novels I've rated in a long time. So of course I was like, okay, I gotta go read this. So I put it towards the top, finished it in a couple days. It was quite good. But overall, I would grade. I would give this book about a 4 out of 5 star. And I'll go over all of that towards our later parts of this podcast episode. First, I wanted to just talk about who Alice Feeney is and just the general plot of Daisy Darker. So let's just briefly talk about what Daisy Darker is about, then I'll talk about Alice Feeney. So we have this book. It's kind of a murder mystery book. It's a family reunion gone awry. Daisy Darker's entire family is basically estranged except for like the mom and a sister, but mostly they all don't really talk to each other. But they go back to assemble for their Nana's 80th birthday, which happens to be on Halloween time. Nana lives in this crumbling Gothic house, and she lives in a place called Sea Glass. So everybody always has these fond memories of Sea Glass. Well, maybe not fond, but just very heavy memories of Sea Glass. Sea Glass is also a bit isolated from the rest of the world, so that kind of makes sense. The family arrives, and of course, as all families do, each one of them harbors some kind of secret. So when it strikes midnight on Nana's birthday, they all find Nana dead. And they're soon realizing that as time is passing on this isolated island, the tide has come in. They can't really escape. People are being slowly picked off one by one. If you are a fan of Agatha Christie, this is definitely up your alley, but it's got some darker aspects to it. Definitely gothic, atmospheric, definitely a thriller. It's super fun. Let me just talk about who Alice Feeney is real fast, and then we'll talk about my thoughts on the book. Daisy Darker is actually her 5th novel, and it is her most recent novel. She has been possibly optioned to do a movie adaptation of Rock, Paper, Scissors, and that might be on Netflix, so we'll see. I have not read any of Alice Feeney's other novels. This is actually her first one I have read. She is a New York Times selling best author, and she was a BBC journalist for a really long time. You can find a lot of her information if you want to learn more about Alice Feeney generally down in the description, or if you are not watching on YouTube, make sure to check out our show notes at darksideofthelibrary.com. Now let's get into my review of this novel, and I'm going to just tell you a few extra tidbits about the story. Mostly because we have quite a few characters and I need to break them down a little bit, and then I'll tell you my thoughts as we go. So we have Nana, first and foremost. This is Grandma. She's turning 80. Her birthday's Halloween. She makes this a big deal all the time. She lives on Sea Glass, lives in this Gothic manor. She's also a children's author, and her biggest hit novel is called Daisy Darker's Little Secret. So a thing about Nana is that Daisy wasn't necessarily named after her granddaughter. At least that's what she says. And this was always kind of a little bit of a thing. The other granddaughters were like, oh, well, why didn't you name it after me? All the granddaughters were named after kind of flowers, by the way. And she was like, I just liked Daisy Darker. She likes those alliterations. I do too. I can't really blame her, to be perfectly honest. Nana is witty. She's quirky. She doesn't take any bullshit. I really like Nana. I love Nana, in fact. I thought she was a great character. She's actually kind of the character where she's sits in the corner and sometimes watches the drama ensue, and she's just sipping the tea. So I like Nana a lot. We have Nana's son, whose name is Frank, and he is very obsessed. He's a composer, he's a musician, and he basically throughout his entire life, he's been more devoted to his career, the music, all of that stuff, more than his family, including his daughters. So that's something that's been a bit of like a thorn in everybody's side, is that Frank is very talented and very awesome and actually pretty caring too. And he tries to buy his children's love a lot. And, you know, like he can be really endearing, but he also just like abandoned them at the same time. Next, we have Nancy, who is the wife. Nancy and Nana still continued their conversation, even though her son and her are no longer really together, but Nancy still maintained contact with Nana. She's pretty cold, still very much lives in the past, resentful of Frank for sure. She definitely has a favorite child who is Lily, one of the daughters. They kind of act very similarly, and that is prevalent throughout the book. So Frank and Nancy are the parents of the three daughters. So our first daughter, who's the eldest, is Rose. Rose is more reserved. She loves animals. Like, she prefers animals over people. Don't blame her. I get it. So she ended up actually becoming a vet, and she, so that's kind of her. She's the smartest of the daughters. So that's kind of her virtue, is like intelligence. And then our next daughter is Lily. And Lily was always like the really beautiful one, but she's super manipulative. She's egocentric. She wants to be the center of attention all the time. She is also really cold, which is kind of ironic because she's, you know, kind of like tries to be the life of the party. But with her family, she's extremely evil sometimes. But again, the book's perspective is actually through Daisy and her lens. Now, Daisy is the youngest. Daisy was born with a heart condition where she was not supposed to live longer than 13. Daisy is also secretly mentioned to be Nana's favorite granddaughter. She's significantly younger than the rest of the granddaughters, and she always felt a little ostracized, and the fact that she was kind of in the hospital a lot kind of put her further away from her family. So that's a little bit about Daisy. We also have another couple characters. We have Trixie, who is the niece or the great-great-granddaughter of Nana. This is actually Lily's daughter, and she kind of emulates Daisy a lot. So she's nothing like what Lily would have wanted, because Lily and Daisy always kind of were butting heads when they were growing up. But Daisy and Trixie are very, very similar. Trixie really enjoys books. She likes to escape, you know, just like Daisy does too. She, you know, she's very reclusive as well. She just wants to fit in. She's very kind. So Trixie and Daisy, very, very similar, but Lily's daughter. Then we have an outlier character, just a person that's been in the family's life for a very long time, Connor. Connor is around the girls' age, and he basically is he's a survivor of his father's abuse. His mother passed away, and his father became an alcoholic, and Nana kind of saved Connor. So that's a bit of a rundown of that whole family. That's a lot of characters to keep in mind. So we have very distinct characters throughout the story. That was a plus. That was a very big bonus. Because usually for me, especially, I just have so much going on up in my head. Sometimes when you get 9 characters in a story, it's hard to keep them together. In this case, it was good. Also, they were all isolated with each other. So, but their characteristics were really easy to tell apart. Just how they spoke to each other. You could just really tell they were very much, this is Lily for sure speaking, and this is Daisy for sure speaking. Even Trixie and Daisy had some nuance there that just made some distinguishable differences. So that was really nice. So speaking of the writing style, it was really entertaining. I was fully immersed in the story, but I did feel like things tended to go on for a little longer than they should have. And sometimes I felt like Daisy at times was a little insufferable. She very clearly dislikes her sisters, especially Lily, and she especially dislikes her mother, or at least holds a lot of resentment. And there was a part in the story, and I can't remember the quote currently, what exactly transpired, but there was just a point in there where I was like, dude, you need to get over it. You need therapy. So, there was just a point where I was just like, I can't listen to it anymore. And that kind of long drawn did get to me a few times, but I don't feel like it destroyed the novel at all. Like I said, it's a 4 out of 5 for me. Speaking of Daisy too, one thing that I felt like was really interesting, I did have a lot of questions popping up in my head, but this kind of actually, I'm not going to spoil the novel, the end, because I kept asking myself some of the questions about Daisy, like, what is Daisy? What is her position on that? You don't really get to know Daisy, even though you are literally hearing her perspective, seeing her lens, hearing her words of each thing, each event. You still don't really get to know Daisy. So that, to me, I always would ask myself questions about Daisy, but that in turn made me realize the plot or the secret really early on. Even though I did know exactly what the turn and surprise of the novel would have been, the rest of it actually didn't ruin the novel for me. I was shocked. I called it really early. Like, I called it probably within 10% of the novel. I'm not even lying. I was like, okay, I know what's going on. Because I got some feels. I've read enough novels and watched enough movies where I'm like, wait a minute, this sounds kind of familiar. But it was vague enough where I don't think everybody would have realized it. So anyway, there is a couple big reveals at the end of the story that, even though I guessed it, they were pretty good. I thought they were pretty satisfying, and I really did enjoy it quite a bit. The only thing is, sometimes it did feel like the story was dragging on, mostly because I felt like Daisy was just, her mom and her sister Lily, they suck a lot. And honestly, Rose just standing by watching some of this, or just really not doing anything, or really not being a participant in any of this stuff, is really crappy too. Like, she's not any better. So there was a lot of that going on, which was like, it got a little old. So I forgot to mention, I went through all of the characters. What is happening during this whole thing in Sea Glass when they finally see that Nana is dead, and they're basically trapped there until the tide goes away and they can finally, go get some help, is that somebody has left old movies for them to watch. So just home movies, and they're told, hey, can you please watch this tape? So it's revealing bits of the backstory to the family, and we just get to see all of the characters, how they grew up, how they interacted with each other, what their relationships were like, and how they are now, because currently none of them really talk to each other. And we don't really get, we kind of get why, but we're not really sure really why. And why is it that Nana is the only person that unifies them in the first place? So I forgot to mention that whole part where they are seeing home movies throughout the story. And I thought that was a pretty clever way of kind of transferring, going back in time. And, you know, Daisy's watching these films and she's at least explaining some of those inner feelings or actual behind the scenes things that are actually going on while the film is happening and all the other characters are watching it. So truly, as they are isolated and they're watching all of these home movies together, I did feel like the atmosphere was really sinister, or you're kind of waiting on pins and needles. What's going to happen next, especially as the story starts to unravel even further and people are kind of getting slowly picked off, and it's like, wait a minute, what's happening and how are they going to get through the night? So I did feel like there was a lot of great writing there. If you're looking for a great thriller, a great murder mystery, Agatha Christie-esque book, I do actually recommend Daisy Darker. It is, I think, unique. Some of the characters can be a little cartoonish. That's probably why they're distinguishable. But I didn't mind it so much. Sometimes it went a little long, or sometimes I felt like it dragged a little bit. But it wasn't enough to deter me from enjoying the book or finishing the novel. And I actually guessed what a lot of those twists and turns would be, and I still thoroughly enjoyed this novel. And I'm sure you know this by now, I've become picky. I'm becoming a little picky. So this one was really refreshing and nice to read. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Honestly, this would make a great Halloween read, but as we're approaching springtime, this might be kind of fun during summertime if you do end up being on an isolated island somewhere with your family members. It would be kind of a fun novel to read at the same time. So check out Alice Feeney's Daisy Darker. And make sure to comment down below. Let me know what you guys think of that read. I love the comments I've gotten over on YouTube, so definitely do that. On your favorite listening app, make sure to rate and review because it really helps other readers find us. And also, you know, make sure to recommend this podcast to friends or family who might enjoy a creepy, dark read or two in their life. So that would be amazing. Thank you so much for doing that. We like to post every Wednesday and Friday. It might be a little different because we're trying to catch up with March. I apologize. It's been a crazy, crazy month. So hopefully we'll be able to get some great March reads for you because there are a lot. Spring and summertime, we're already ramping up for Halloween time. I'm not even joking. Like, you know how the seasons are in retail. We're like 2 seasons ahead. So get ready for some really awesome reads coming up. Make sure to join us on our socials. You can find it in the description down below, or you can find it on darksideofthelibrary.com or at Darkside of the Library on Instagram, Facebook, and on YouTube. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great week.